Welcome back to Targeted, the show that explores what happens when unchecked power goes off the rails and ordinary people get caught in the crosshairs. Our final episode today features a conversation with Russian lawyer turned activist Pavel Ivlev. Today, Pavel lives in exile in the United States, but years ago, Pavel faced a high-stakes decision, and he made the right choice to get the hell out of Russia before it was too late. Born just outside of Moscow and educated at top universities in Russia and abroad, Pavel Ivlev entered the legal world at exactly the right moment. He joined ALM Feldman's, an elite law firm where one of his colleagues was Igor Shuvalov, a name we'll come back to later. Shuvalov would go on to serve as Russia's deputy prime minister from 2008 to 2018. And Pavel has plenty to say about him. But for now, business was booming and post-Soviet tax law was a gold rush.
Once we counted that if you combine the wealth of our clients, it will be like a half of Russian billionaires' wealth combined. So it's huge, like all the top names, not all of them, but a half of them were our clients and their businesses.
What was the business climate like in Russia in those days? What was your view? Did it feel free, fair, moving away from the Soviet regime? What was your impression?
Well, if you compare it to what we had in Soviet times, and I was only a student when the Soviet Union collapsed, so I can compare, obviously, but it's uncomparable. There was no business and no free market. And as I can imagine, it takes time for law to adapt and for some practice to be built. So I would say by the end of 90s, beginning of 2000s, the legal environment suitable for more or less Western-style business came to Russia, came to Moscow. It was a free market, but of course, a wild sort of free market. But again, the more or less democratic government of Kasyanov and the Russian State Duma, the parliament, in the very beginning of 2000s and up to 2004, they did a great job building a proper, laws for the market economy. So by that time, we had a good base to do business based on, rules of law, rule of law.
You were optimistic. You thought you would live in Russia and continue growing your career in a flourishing book of business.
Yeah, that was one side, and I think the biggest side of me, looking forward. And from 1996, I could be fully American. My wife won green card in the lottery, so we jumped to the US, stayed there for some months, and then decided to go back. Been back and forth between Russia and the US, and say in the year 2002, I took the final decision. We remain in Russia. That's the business. Everything's growing.
Even in your most optimistic time, at the top of your career, you still had some concerns.
I always had to think about safety, which was United States for me. But no plans to, to relocate and live in the U.S. Only if I have to.
How long has it been since you've been back home?
More than 20 years. I left Russia on November 16, 2004. Never come back.
So you already understood that safety in Russia wasn't guaranteed. Safety isn't really guaranteed anywhere. But one of your clients that you were working with at the time was Yukos Oil. When did you first, and I know hindsight now is 2020, when did you first realize that Yukos Oil might be an unsafe client to work with from the perspective of the Russian government?
Well, I completely realized that Yukos, not us, but Yukos and its top management, its shareholders, are in big danger when, of course, and everyone who remembers knows that moment. That was beginning of July 2003 when Mr. Platon Lebedev, the top financials, like sort of CFO of the Group Manatap, which was the holding company, which was the core shareholder of Yukos. Yukos was the public company at the time, but publicly listed. So when Lebedev was taken to jail, it was immediately public. That was the big moment. That's when I realized we can be at risk ourselves, because we were outside counselors. So there were many law firms, including the big law of the United States or UK. They've all been servicing Yukos. So we more or less realized the problem, the risk for us as lawyers to continue representing Yukos and their shareholders.
But at the same time, any outside law firm that had a client who got into legal trouble, this is almost time for the firm to step in. This is part of why you hire big firms in the first place. So I imagine you were also focused a little bit, on your client.
Exactly. So what the big law, White and Case, Clifford Chance, what they did, they jumped out of the sinking ship quite quickly. And there was an amazing story how they all quite fast cutting ties with with Yukos, which been just months before was the top client for them in Russia. No, they quit, but we didn't.
They jumped ship.
Yep.
You stuck with your client.
Yep. That was my choice.
When did you realize that things were getting really bad? And when did you realize that you were being targeted?
I think I realized that things are to be worsening and be much worse than it was. That was when Khodorkovsky himself was arrested. So it's October 2003. And then, of course, we started to get, our law officers started to be targeted first by investigators came with questions. We refused to answer them because this is our client, so it's privileged. That was summer of 2004, so more than half a year after arrest of Khodorkovsky. So then they told us, look, you will be tax audited. Us, the law firm. Investigators told us. So it's already a very strange situation where investigators from the prosecutor general office tell you that you will be tax audited. And we were tax audited quite heavily. which they didn't find anything because we didn't do anything wrong as a law firm. Everything was okay. But it took a couple of months where they were, digging into our paper. I mean, tax inspectors. And soon after then, the investigators from the prosecutor general office came with much more serious, papers. So they had search in our office in Moscow, and they search apartments of our employee, some younger lawyers' employees, not mine at the time, and then started to interrogate us. That was mid-November 2004, and I soon left because that was too much of the pressure.
And to understand Pavel's story, you have to understand Yukos. In 1993, Russia privatized its oil industry, carving up its state-run infrastructure into new companies. One of them, Yukos, was bought by Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a banker and investor who quickly became the richest man in Russia. Some say he was even on the barricades during the failed 1991 communist coup, a detail that, true or not, speaks to his ambition. But Khodorkovsky didn't just want to be the wealthiest man in Russia. He wanted political influence. He started using his money to fund legislators in the Russian State Duma, pushing policies that suited his vision. Problem? His rise coincided with that of a far more dangerous opponent, one who didn't tolerate rivals. A former KGB officer turned political strategist turned presidential advisor turned FSB chief turned prime minister turned acting president, Vladimir Putin. On October 25, 2003, Khodorkovsky was arrested on fraud and tax evasion charges totaling billions. What followed was a clear message to anyone who thought wealth alone could shield them from the Kremlin. So the firm comes under investigation. The firm's employees are coming under investigation. But you're still in Russia. You haven't jumped ship. You haven't done what all the other firms have done. What did it take for you to realize I'm in significant danger here and I need to get the hell out of Dodge?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we were under investigation from, say, July 2004. So it was already months, but we didn't know about it yet. And no, that's the wrong thing. We knew about it. We didn't know the level of the danger. We were of the opinion, okay, we had a client who is now in big conflict with the government, who is under attack. So obviously the government should have questions to us, which we are not to answer unless needed.
Was your family concerned at this point?
My family saw something's going on, but look, we at the time our youngest was less than 1 year old, so there were other things to care for my wife, and yes, she saw something going on because I was too nervous and then too busy with doing things, but that was okay.
It was on the radar, but no one had packed their bags.
No. And I was of the opinion I still should do my best and maybe get rid of it. So we come to a solution with the government. We come to a solution with the clients. Went to Yukos general counsel at the time, Svetlana Bakhmina, and asked her directly to give us a permission to talk to the investigator. She said no. I said, okay, well, no means no. So we keep our loyalty to the client. But then they came to us directly. And I was, as a deputy managing partner, our managing partner, she was not there at the moment. So I wasn't, walking around with the investigators. And we ended up in my personal, room my office. And then they looked into my papers, took what they wanted, go into my safe, get what was there. And finally, because it was quite late in the night, I said, okay, we'll see you tomorrow in our offices. General prosecutor's office in Moscow, the big building we all knew about. And then I think the next day was weekend. But on Monday, I went there and they started interrogating our associates and younger lawyers and employees. I went to the prosecutor general office to represent, as an attorney, represent my employees who were interrogated.
You were there on behalf of your employees,
Right.
on behalf of your clients.
Right.
You didn't feel like you were necessarily there defending yourself.
Yeah, I didn't expect that that they will turn to me right the same evening or the next day and start interrogating me. That I didn't expect, because this is the complete violation of law. Of the how it's called, the Criminal Procedure Code. That's the law in Russia, and then that is about what can or cannot happen during the investigation. So, of course, you cannot interrogate a lawyer who just came to your office, represented his client. That's nonsense. But this is exactly what they did with me. And I was told by an investigator, if you do not testify, we will go to the court and I'll put you in jail tonight. That's what he told me. So, what did I do to protect myself? I shared some general information with him, but of course it was clear I am cooperating.
One of the things that I've come across in speaking with multiple people who have been targeted is that, at least initially, it's something they believe they can solve. And they don't look at it as being something with 25 years of repercussions that follow. They think often in the early phases, I'll be able to solve this within maybe weeks, within a month. And then before they know it, it's determined the outcome or trajectory of the rest of their life, as it has in your situation. And it sounds genuinely like, up until this moment, you really believe this could be fixed.
Yeah, this is absolutely correct. I thought that, yes, we are in danger, but it's manageable. But then, he interrogated me against the law. He told me, I asked the investigator, what do you want me to say? We did nothing wrong. We just represented our client. Everything was legal, what we were doing. He said,
how did he answer?
That's interesting. You're a lawyer. You know better what to tell me. That was his answer. I said, you want me to tell you that we were keeping bags of cash in our office and give them to some people outside of Yukos, and that was Yukos money. You want me to tell this? I asked him. He said, yeah, something like this. But I said, that's never happened. Okay. I mean, you're a lawyer, you know better.
He wanted you to read between the lines, and he wanted you to do his job for him.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, he knew who I am. He knew I'm smart enough attorney. So, at the end, he was a former geography teacher. Somehow he made it to the position of an investigator. But yeah, there was a time.
In this moment when you're with the investigator and you realize you're in danger, and you realize now I'm really a target of Putin and the Russian government, what did it take for you to say, I need to get out of here? And how did it work?
And he was kind enough to let me go. He said, yeah, you gave us a statement. You can go. You can even leave the country for a couple of days before we call you again and then probably have more questions to you. Probably he found some sympathy to me too. It's hard to say. It was my first and last time seeing him, so I don't know him.
Meaning if you had been more aggressive, if you had been more defensive, if you had been more difficult to work with, looking back now, maybe you never make it out of that building.
Absolutely. You're right. But I was trying to pretend that I'm with all my heart and respect, I'm cooperating with the government. I'm the friend of the government. That was my strategy.
You get out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
What's going through your head? What do you do next?
I think at that moment, I was exploring the idea to leave the country as soon as I could. So that was in my mind. Nothing else. So it was too much pressure for me personally during these last days. And obviously, I got a much better picture of what's going on. So if before my interrogation, I thought, okay, I can still, using my friends and connection, I can protect our law firm. That was my main task. After interrogation, I was clearly, okay, I now need to take care of myself.
The goalposts had shifted.
Yeah. So what I did, I went to our office, which was not too far, sit next to my computer, it was a desktop, and started to look the flights out of country. So the latest, 10-something p.m. flight was to Kiev from Sheremetyevo, so I figured it out I can make it. And I remember my partners came to my room, sitting next to me and asking me what's going on, tell us. And I only told them, okay, I'm too tired, I will tell you tomorrow. And left. And went to the airport, took the flight, and then left the country.
You assume you'd be back.
Yeah, of course. Of course, I thought after that the thing could be sorted out. I am outside in safety, and I come back.
It was just a breather.
Yeah, probably. You can call it that way.
What's the first call that you make when you land in Kyiv?
Well, I called my wife, told her I am now in a city where my grandmother was born.
You thought they were listening.
Yeah, just, in case. But anyway, it was safe. Yeah, and then the second call was to my friend at the time, Mr. Shuvalov, who was traveling abroad, I think he was in Brazil. So time was right to talk to him late evening in Kiev. By the way, the Maidan was going on in Kiev right at the time. So it was another revolution, the previous one, 2004. That I didn't notice. Yeah, and then I told him what happened. And I told him, Igor, I'm sorry, but I left. And I will come back only after you tell me it's safe. He said, okay. Got the notice, got the message. And in fact, later on, he told me, it's okay if you come back. It was in December here in this city, London.
But you haven't been back.
Yeah, because he told me, you can come back, but you need to cooperate. You have to cooperate. And I said, Igor, I'm not going to cooperate with that. It will be a problem, not just for me, but for too many people, including yourself, if I cooperate with them to protect myself. And I think he understood me at the time.
Was your wife resistant to leaving? I can imagine that must have been a very difficult situation for her
She didn't
And like
want
you said, this wasn't a focus for her the way it was for you.
Yeah, definitely. She was very upset that I left. She understood it is like life-changing, which it was. Again, I was here in London for a couple of weeks for Christmas, so she came here with our daughter, and we talked, and I think we just agreed that yes, we have to relocate the whole family to New Jersey.
The hammer fell hard, and it fell fast. Khodorkovsky would serve nearly a decade in prison, as would some of his associates, despite international criticism. Yukos was dissolved, and though Pavel was smart enough to have created his safety net in the US years before, that didn't mean he got away totally unscathed. The American government refused to extradite him to Russia on embezzlement charges totaling nearly 400 billion rubles. Putin's response to his refusal to cooperate in the Yukos investigation back in 2005. But that didn't stop Interpol from willingly issuing a red notice against Pavel for those same charges. Interpol eventually rescinded the notice due to its clear political motivation, but that didn't stop WorldCheck from notifying financial institutions about the supposed potential risks around Pavel, leading to him being debanked. Because the playbook of transnational repression we've come to get so familiar with over the course of this show actually tends to vary little from case to case. But Rachel Denber argues that targeting can manifest in new and sometimes terrifying ways as global attitudes and geopolitics shift. Rachel's a deputy director of the Europe and Central Asia Division of Human Rights Watch, and she specializes in countries belonging to the former Soviet Union. She's also the former director of the organization's Moscow office, where she did advocacy and research work throughout the region.
There is a great reluctance and a great suspicion on the part of numerous governments to issue visas to people who have Russian passports, even if they are human rights defenders, investigative journalists, democracy activists, and the like. Some countries in the European Union have, some member states have very generous policies and have taken in, provided refuge, temporary refuge, all kinds of temporary status to Russian human rights defenders and critics and the like. But it's not across the board. And then even and then the question of safety is an important one. You think you're safe because you have this status, or you're in a country of refuge, and this isn't about Russia, but this is about another country. But I just a couple of months ago, a dissident from Turkmenistan was just in a bar in Boston and had the crap beaten out of him by people who were quite obviously government proxies, right? So, your physical safety isn't assured. I think we're maybe overly romanticized ideas of what it is to be in exile. It is a colossally traumatic experience, right? Because the Russian security services obviously they see these critical masses of dissidents abroad as problematic. But I just want to say there's already, as I mentioned before, a great deal, particularly in European countries, a great deal of suspicion about or not a great desire to bring to provide visas and et cetera to Russian citizens. It's depending on who the person is connected to. Maybe they want a further tool of pressure on some other on the other connections that this person has, right? So in Yves's case, I believe it's Mikhail Khodorkovsky. If they really want to pressure someone else, and they think that they can guilt trip or get to someone else by putting pressure on a third person, well then that's a tool that's available to them or to the government. or if they just want to send a chilling message. And this is a straight up easy case for them to do. The other 15 years later, it just sends a message to everyone else that you're never going to be safe. You think you're going to get away from us? You think you're going to be safe somewhere else? You're not. No matter how far away you go, and no matter how long, we'll still find you. We'll still get you. We'll still make your life complicated by pressing criminal charges, which is going to put you on an Interpol list, which is going to freeze your assets at home, which is going to compromise your family and wreck your reputation. I mean, the thing that I wanted to voice was that since the full scale, Russia's practiced transnational repression for many years, through poisonings, through extradition requests, but things have qualitatively and quantitatively changed since the full scale invasion. And now just recently as December, it adopted, Russia has this foreign agent law, right? And which just tries to tarnish people who have any critic, really, to try to tarnish them as agents of foreign influence. And in December, for example, they adopted a law that created special, and since many of them have fled abroad, as they see that they're now facing, growing numbers of people who are continuing to do their activism abroad, they're trying to the government's trying to up its game to go after them, right? Because it's a relatively new phenomenon for Russia to have, distinct from China, to have so many people, so many critics in exile. I mean, Khodorkovsky's been in exile since he was freed in 2014. But aside from Khodorkovsky, there really haven't been that many. The concept of the Russian exiled movement is, they haven't had that since the Soviet era, right? So they're trying to catch up.
Still, it did take Putin's regime all the way until 2019 to finally get around to convicting Pavel for his alleged crimes, sentencing him to 10 years in a penal colony, in absentia, of course. In the meantime, Pavel has been a vocal advocate for political change in Russia. In 2009, he helped found the Committee for Russian Economic Freedom, which fights for economic and civil rights in the country. For years, he's led an educational project that helps to integrate people from post-Soviet states into Western society. He was a friend and advisor to the late anti-corruption and political reform activist Alexei Navalny, before Navalny died suspiciously in a Russian prison in February 2024. The thing about Pavel is, he seems somewhat unfazed by all of this, as if he did exactly what anyone would do, or at least anyone he believes has a conscience. Where are your partners and your former clients today? Best in the sort of the best case and worst case scenarios?
Well, unfortunately, we were not communicating for many years with like Yelena or other partners, but younger partners, they still doing legal stuff in Russia. They live and work there.
And the executives from Yukos?
They left. I mean, top guys went to jail. Khodorkovsky spent 10 years in jail, and then Lebedev more or less the same. But like CFO, who was American, he left. Treasurer, he left. He lives in Spain now, I guess. So yeah, those not from very top, not really in charge of everything like Khodorkovsky, but below him, most of them left and never returned.
In what way would you say today you still feel the sort of long-term impacts of being targeted? Because in speaking to you, even before this interview, it doesn't seem like you're very phased today. Like, you don't feel like you're in danger. I think if I were in your situation and the Russian government had sort of ever been after me, that I might be looking over my shoulder. But It doesn't seem to have affected you that way.
Yeah, but I feel no reason to worry about my physical safety. The travel around, after it's going to be 10 years this year when I finally get rid of red notice and started to travel. So, of course, being careful where I go. I don't go to Belarus. Even Turkey, I'm a little bit afraid to go. But, there are enough good rule of law countries in this world still I can go. Like
no one can
United
travel anywhere.
Yeah, no, I can travel, and I love to do it. And I continue doing business. I continue, working for my clients. One of the big fields I'm doing now is helping them to get rid of Interpol. I became really a good specialist in that field. I never thought I will, but that's what I'm. Among other things, I'm doing is
and again, another sort of feature of people who've been targeted is very often they end up helping others who've dealt with similar circumstances because it's without knowing it, the Russian government added a new skill set to your to your professional career.
They were helpful, and the trouble which continued to follow me because of all these charges, because of the Interpol, because of the what's called wall check, who keep a profile on me, is the fact that banks continue to close my accounts.
Banks continue to close your accounts today. U.S. banks.
U.S. banks. JP Morgan Chase just closed my accounts, all of them, including my pension stuff. The investments I cannot touch because this is my pension plan, part of my pension.
How often does this occur?
Like annually.
Annually, you are debanked.
Yep.
Still today.
Yep. I mean, this October was the last one. It was JP Morgan Chase, the largest bank in the world. And before that, it was Bank of America. Yeah. That's life. And that is clearly because of these charges. Because wall check, if you ever seen their page, their profile on a person, on the top of it, it has your name, my birth date, my place of birth, and then in bold, financial fraud. What you would expect from a compliance officer in any bank. You read this? Do we need such a client? And, with all this regulation, banks, they don't care who am I in reality. They care about their own risks. If they see me too risky for them to continue doing business with him, they close account.
You've told me that you'd like to go back to Russia if you could.
Yes, of course. This is my country. This is where I belong, where I grew up, where I did most of my, I believe, achievements, good things. And I think that I have another, hopefully, 10 years to be effective. And so if I'm allowed to go back, I will go back and, hopefully, I mean, it's just not.
Have you ever thought of like what it would take for you to feel safe traveling back to Russia?
No, it's
a pipe dream.
No. That is why I am, for the last 10 years, even more, I'm deeper and deeper in the politics and the, staying in opposition to the Russian government, because I clearly realized, and I know it for sure, that the only way for me back to Russia is the change of regime. So if Putin and his gang is no longer in power, that will be an option for me, not just to come back, but to try to do something good for the country, for its new, government, and perhaps to be a judge, which was always my dream as a lawyer, to become a judge, or something like this. So, I'm 55 now, so I have still some years to do this. If the regime changes, then that is why I'm a part of Russian opposition, opposing the Putin's regime and trying to fight it and find this, end for that dictatorship which we are now having in Russia.
So being targeted gave you a new and clear purpose in life.
Yes, I didn't think back 20 years ago that I can be a politician. No, and then I didn't think that way. It is exactly this exile, and of course the reason for it. And I was representing Khodorkovsky for the years he was in jail by working with the international team of lawyers and lobbyists even to help Khodorkovsky get out of jail, and that brought me into a different world of politics. And of course, it's still not much of real politics. It's not like doing politics in the Western universe. It's just you're against the Russian government, and you're trying to find a solution how Russia can get rid of that government.
How do you react when you've seen people from the West, like a Tucker Carlson, for instance, or others, that make the trip to Russia and say nice things about Russia and say, well, maybe it's not as bad as we think? When you see people in the West defending the current Russian government, how does that resonate with you?
Obviously, I don't like it. I disagree. I believe they just following their own goals by doing this. Some do it for money, some do it for just to be, followed by as much public as possible because they're saying something.
Hot take.
You're right, like Tucker Carlson, because their purpose is different. Do they to fight with Putin regime? No, it's not their purpose. Their purpose to bring themselves to the public, to entertain the public, and then saying something political, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. And to be honest, I believe there are still there's still enough good things you can share about Russia, and you can present this country because it's huge and has such a history and culture and everything. So there is always a room to say something good about the country, and even about Putin. Some people can find this was not me. I believe he is just a monster and dictator, and then he kills people in Ukraine, which is I couldn't imagine myself be against Russia and on the side of Ukraine, but that's I am now. I couldn't imagine this even 5 years ago. But that's where the situation and that's where Putin's behavior, politics brought me.
When I compare your story against some of the others that I've spoken with, I see others who have been crushed. They lost their life. They lost their reputation by being targeted. You seemed to come out from this, and the striking thing in speaking with you about this is, and maybe this is just a function of who you are today, 20 years later, you seem so calm talking about this. Is that just your personality? Is that Russian stoicism, something else?
Oh, that's not Russian stoicism. I'm half Jew. and that's probably my personality. I think by heart I'm very optimistic about the things, and I'm trying to be so, even if we can face troubles, and when I'm in trouble, I'm obviously not that calm. But to reflect about the past, which you cannot change, and then it's better to be on the positive side rather than it's all crashed my life. I mean, okay, but you continue living, so do something positive and probably successful now rather than keep yourself in the past and consider what you did wrong, what should be. This sort of people, they I mean, I don't know them, but I think they blame the others instead of like thinking what themselves did wrong and what can be done now to improve the situation. So
I'm not sure if I describe you as an optimistic realist or a realistic optimist. But somewhere in there.
It's hard to explain. And sometimes I can be very much pessimist. Like I'm very much pessimistic about the future of United States under the Trump's government. But that's my general pessimism. On the other hand, I live there. My kids grown up. They now, work there. That's our family life, which cannot be detached from the United States. The whole world cannot be detached from the United States. So let's hope that this government wouldn't do something completely wrong, and what Trump is doing would bring prosperity and then success to the country and to the people. But I am pessimistic about it. I'm sorry.
My final question to you. Had you not gotten out that day, where do you think you'd be today? Had you not left the cave?
It's my answer will be quite surprising, I think, for you. I think I would be somewhere top position in the government of Russia, or maybe in the justice, being a judge of the Supreme Court, for example. That where I would be, because I would cooperate and I would become a part of the Putin regime. That's what probably would happen with me if I don't go.
Pavel, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for having me.
People targeting other people has been going on since the dawn of humanity. But in this series, we've had the chance to explore targeting as a modern phenomenon. And with the growth of digital media and the growth of government power, targeting is more dangerous today and takes on other shapes and forms it might not have in the past. If you've had a chance to listen to these episodes, you understand that not everything is always what it seems, and you can't trust what you read, even in some of the most high-profile, well-respected journalistic outlets. I hope that if anything, we've made you a little bit more skeptical. On the other hand, I hope that you also take away the way that humans have responded to very difficult decisions. And I hope that you not only are dismayed and concerned about the stories that we featured, but that you do take some sense of inspiration and how you might react if you were in the crosshairs. Targeted is a production of Next Chapter Podcasts. Please follow the show, subscribe, rate and review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow me, Zach Abramowitz, on X at Zach Abramowitz, and subscribe to my Substack at legallydisrupted.com. To learn more about our guests and their stories, go to targeted.com.